Okay, welcome to day 3 of the Retro Build PC extravaganza. Today, as you can probably tell, we're working on storage. So, there are a bunch of different storage mediums you can choose from for building your retro PC. And a lot of them they're much more newer technology, but they work just as good as the old technology. So, this build is going to be mainly focused on DOS 6.22. And as such, we have to keep in mind that whenever we install a DOS system, our primary partition is limited to only 2 gigabytes. So we can't make a partition any larger than that and expect DOS to be able to install on it and boot from it. So that being said, we want to be careful with how large of a storage medium we use, because the larger we use, if we can only use 2 gig in the front, the more we waste. So the primary one, obviously, as you probably have all seen, this is a standard 3.5-inch hard drive. These work really good still. The only problem is that they're old, and the older they get, the more prone they are to failure, because these are, after all, mechanical instruments, and after a while they will fail just because of the wear and tear that you put on them. So although I still recommend using them, understand that if you're using an old one, even though it seems to be working fine, it can fail any time. And it's terrible to get all your stuff installed and your system up and running, only to find out that it fails because the drive ultimately just gave up because of how old it is. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, if you've got new ones floating around that have got, zero wear and tear on them or barely used, I would say by all means go for it. But I wouldn't at this point. I've only got a couple of these laying around myself these days, and I probably wouldn't put anything on them that I really am worried about losing on, just because of the nature of the drive. So that's number one. Number two are these are relatively newer. These are memory card readers. Works with a CF card, and the way these worked primarily it was similar to a hard drive. The cable would plug in right there. Your power would go here. You just get any card. You'd plug the card right in there, pops in, and bam, you're ready to go. The beauty of these is they can mount in the back of a case. So once you're mounted, you can pull the card in, take the card out and put the card in as many times as you need to, and as long as the system's off, obviously. But the beauty is that you can mount it, and then once this case is all sealed up and you're doing stuff, you can, pull the card out, maybe take it over to a different computer, copy data and files over to that computer may have onto it, bring it back, plug it back in here, turn the system on, and all the data you needed to bring onto your PC is now there instead. So instead of having to copy it, say, off of a CD or even a floppy, you can just do it this way instead, and it's much faster. These things are great. The only problem is that CF cards aren't exactly that common anymore. So it's one thing to bear in mind that although they work really well, and these readers are one of the few I see that actually have mounting brackets on them. Understand, if you're going to buy CF cards, you're going to have to look for a place like on Amazon or even on the used market to find the CF cards. But I used them myself multiple times and never had a problem with them. So something to keep in mind. Also, this is another type of the same type thing. The only difference is that this type doesn't require a cable, unlike this type where a cable is going to plug in here. So on this one, it's the same concept. You're just going to plug your CF card in just like that. You're going to plug your power in here. Then, instead of plugging a cable into this and plugging it into your motherboard, this will actually plug directly into your motherboard. It is the same exact format as your standard cable. So they look the same, plugs right into the motherboard, and once you're plugged in and you added power, you're good to go. Only drawback with it, obviously, is that if you close your case up, once this is plugged in and you need to take it out for any reason, well, then you gotta open your case up and do all that stuff. So it's just something to bear in mind. But these are nice units to use too, because they take up a lot less space and it minimizes the number of cables you have inside your case. Alright, on to the third thing. This is similar to the CF card, but this is for an SD card. So you get your standard SD card, goes inside here like that, plug your cable in here, your power either here or here, and you're good to go. I usually just leave these hanging inside the case. They work really well. And the nice thing about SD cards is you can find them pretty much anywhere, in multiple different sizes. Not just small sizes. They get up really big, from what I understand, up to about 256 megabytes. So that's huge. But obviously in DOS, that'd be a gigantic waste. I'd say the smaller the better. If you can find yourself some 4 gig cards, if you're using DOS, that's probably your best bet for one of these guys. But these work really well as well. And of course, last but not least, we have the same concept, but this is a micro SD. So we've got SD, now you got micro SD. So same deal, your micro SD plugs into it, locks in place just like that. Your cable, your power here or here, and again, just let it hang inside your case and it's good to go. They work really well. They have no issues. I've never had any issues with them. I've worked using with DOS, Windows 95, 98, XP. They all work really well. And the nice thing about them is they use the cards, and you can get these cards relatively super cheap these days. So you don't need to worry about where you're going to find them. Now, the only thing to say about these is the fact that although you can use adapters to make, say, smaller cards fit into larger devices, DOS has an issue with using anything that's not one-to-one. So say for instance you buy your micro SD card and it comes with one of these adapters, right, which converts micro SD into SD, and you happen to buy one of these SD readers, you figure you're all set. Plug it in here, should be able to read it still, it's in the adapter, no problem. Well, that's the problem right there. DOS doesn't like reading anything where it's been converted. Whether it's been converted one time from micro SD to SD, or maybe even 2 times. If you were to say take your micro SD, put it into a CF reader, so now you've got micro SD to SD to CF, and then you plug that in, it does not like it. It has issues, it will complain, and sometimes just hang or not identify the reader at all. So I'd recommend within DOS just choosing one medium and sticking with that medium. Don't try to do conversions, don't try to do anything fancy, even though you may have the stuff for it, because their DOS does not like it. So every one of these, from what I've seen, is all plug and play as far as the BIOS is concerned. On the Pentium machines, I have never seen a BIOS that has complained and said it doesn't recognize or understand the card reader. Usually it sees it, it identifies the card, and as long as the partition's good, it will start booting from it. It may even see the card for the full size, but only use the right the one small partition that you put in there to install DOS. But on the Pentium boards and newer, I've never seen a problem with this. On some of the older boards, I'm not sure. I've never used this on a 486 or less than that, but I would not recommend one of these things, probably because the BIOS just won't recognize it at all. So last thing to talk about are our CD-ROMs. Everyone needs one of these things. You have to have one if you're going to be installing DOS or Windows games or software, just because of the fact that almost everything back in the 90s came on CD, late 90s into early 2000s DVD. But since we're focusing on DOS, we're going to stick with the CD-ROM. They're imperative to have, and without them you lose a lot, because there was a point where we moved all the music from different things on sound cards over to saw CD audio. So not only just installing the software, but oftentimes a lot of the game's music was played off the CD through an audio cable in the back that went to your sound card and allowed you to hear music. So without one of these guys, not only can you not install your software, but if you're playing games that have audio on the CD, you're never going to hear the audio. So just something else to keep in mind you're probably going to need to have. Doesn't really matter what speed. You can go anywhere from 2-speed up to 56 or higher. It really doesn't make a difference, but what's important is that you have one in your system and that it's in relatively good shape, so you don't have to worry about it dying. So that's about it for today's video, just because storage is important, and you have to know what you're going to be using when you go to set your system up. I will put links in the description for all these different devices, so you can view them on Amazon if you want to take a look at them and see how much they cost. But most of these are relatively cheap, $15, maybe $20 if you buy a really super nice one, and then you just have to have your medium. And even the cards, you can find great deals on the cards, 4 for $20 or whatever, depending on the size you get. So it's actually a better solution because it's smaller, it's less expensive, less prone to crashing because there's no moving parts, and it's just overall more dependable. So hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.